to regional planning. And we've invited guest speakers, Carrie Runser-Turner, David Jaber, and Jenny Rogers to present. Carrie and David are both going to talk about some priorities that were identified through the planning processes that they're working on, and how that's been reflected in their regional plans. And Jenny is going to wrap things up by providing examples of how we can continue to engage folks and make sure that their priorities are being heard and also included in our regional plan. Carrie is going to be our first presenter, and Carrie is a senior planner for the Land to Sky Regional Council and is the project manager for a 2010 HUD Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant called GROW-NC. So Carrie's going to be talking to us today about the GROW-NC project and what it's meant for their region. So Carrie, do you want to take it away?
Sure, sounds good. Thanks so much. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to talk with you today about the GROW-WNC project and what we've tried to do with this opportunity in our region. And hopefully this technology will cooperate with us. So as I was putting my presentation together, I thought those of you listening to this probably are not real familiar with North Carolina. So just to give you a quick introduction, the GROW-WNC study area is a 5-county area in the western part of the state. We are in the mountains of western North Carolina. It's a really beautiful area. We have a pretty rich agricultural history. We have a lot of great cultural resources and natural resources. We're home to the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Biltmore Estate. And we have, an urban area, an urban feel in Asheville. We have a total population in our 5-county region of around 450,000. Asheville itself is around 83,000, but then we have really small, very rural towns as well. We have our smallest town is Hot Springs. It has a population of about 500 people, and it's in the mountains at the foot of the, on the Appalachian Trail. And so, we have a lot of topographical challenges in reaching our population, as well as differences in culture and technology across that region. So as we approached this project, we tried to ask folks to participate in it in a lot of different ways, and we kind of framed the questions we were asking in this way. We asked them to think about their community, both locally and at the regional level, and think about the things that they love the most about it. Think about the challenges that they're facing, what things are they concerned about, and then to also think about what they want to see in the future, and how they want their community to look and feel, and what they want it to be like. Similar to most of the regional planning grantees, we kind of, we put together our consortium and pulled together participants into different work groups that had sort of study areas that they were focused on, and those are listed up in the green box. We had economic development, energy, housing, health and wellness, transportation, land use, and natural and cultural resources. And those work groups kind of evolved over time. The health group was added subsequent to the initiation of the project based upon community feedback. The natural and cultural resources group kind of split into two. So essentially what happened was we tried to kind of gather a picture of the region today, as well as what we want to see in the future, by looking at existing plans, gathering information from the work groups about their goals and objectives around their specific topic area, holding a lot of public meetings, which we'll talk about in a moment, and also conducting surveys and small group discussions. And when we held our public meetings, we were really trying to get at those community priorities and hear from community members about things that were important to them. So we, in our initial round of public meetings, we really kind of gave folks activities around our different topic areas where they could kind of help us illustrate what daily life is like and what some of the challenges are that they're facing, what some of the things that they'd like to see in the future. We allowed people to participate in that first round of meetings in a variety of ways. So we also contracted with individuals and community organizations to conduct some small group meetings with some of our populations that are a little bit more difficult to reach. We use that as a way to reach some of our rural populations, like the agricultural folks who maybe don't want to come to a public meeting, but also older adults, youth, and then the African American community, the Latino community, homeless folks in the veteran support group. And then we also have a significant Russian and Ukrainian population here, so we reached out to them as well. And we wanted to try to make sure that folks who took the time to provide us with their input could see their voice throughout the process. And so that's how we try to make sure those community priorities kind of come up to the top and stay important throughout. And I'll kind of illustrate that throughout this process. But one of the things we did was create these visual representations to show people what we heard from them. We used a data analyst, a staff person, to really help us delve into and understand this data, both at the regional level and then also at each county level. And it was pretty interesting to see that across all of those participants, we had over 1,000 people in this first round tell us how important the mountains and the natural beauty of our area is to them. And that was from our youth to older adults, and in our rural areas and urban areas, and across all those different demographic groups. We got a lot of feedback about our economy as well, but jobs and access to quality employment is an important challenge facing our region. And so our project has had a very strong economic development focus. And you can see that in what people want to see in the future as well: better health care, better jobs, better transportation choices. So in terms of some of the overarching themes from the public meetings, I just want to touch on those briefly and then show how they informed both our scenario planning and some of the early implementation activities we've undertaken. What we heard from the public was they want to see our rural areas preserved. They want to see sort of the green economy grow here, as well as a continuation of our rich agricultural history. There was a real focus on growing where infrastructure exists, preserving or enhancing choices, especially related to housing and transportation, a strong emphasis on economic prosperity, welcoming new businesses, supporting the businesses we have, and providing a lot of connections between our communities and our natural resources. We took all that public input and used it for our scenario planning process, and we developed a series of scenarios using a land use model that we shared with the public, including kind of a business as usual case. This is what our region will look like in terms of development if we just proceed as we're going. And then we had 3 other scenarios for comparison, one with a focus on economic prosperity, one with a focus on preservation of our natural and cultural resources, and then an efficient growth scenario that was very much focused on use of existing communities and redevelopment, so not really expanding into much of our undeveloped area. We took that information out to the public again in a wide variety of ways, including in a large public forum, as well as in small group meetings, and we created a virtual meeting and took these little business cards, that's what's at the bottom of the screen there, out to all kinds of different settings so that we could encourage people to participate in whatever way they were most comfortable. We shared with them those various land development scenarios, and this is just a snapshot of that. We had lots of different ways that we showed that information with photographs and storyboards and maps, and lots of information about here's what the future might look like if this was our focus, if we focused on economic prosperity or resource conservation, et cetera. During that activity, that public meeting, we asked participants to basically select the outcomes associated with those scenarios that were most important to them. This is a way that we could continue to reflect back to our participants some of the comments that we heard initially, and also to help kind of help them conceptualize what some of these impacts really would be. What does it really mean to focus on economic prosperity? Well, maybe that means there'd be more job opportunities in rural areas. So we asked everyone to choose the outcomes that were important to them, And we invited them to participate in an activity, a quilting activity, where they could kind of choose the scenario that they liked the best. And then at the end of the meeting, we had sort of a patchwork of all the different feedback that we received about those scenarios. And what we found was that elements of all of those three scenarios were very important. It's interesting to see how nearly evenly matched they are. We kind of anticipated that we would have that and that there would be components of each that were viewed in a favorable way. And so that feedback was really used to shape this blended preferred scenario that we created based on the outcome voting that occurred in those public meetings, as well as in our small group discussions and the online survey that we created. And that feedback really went directly into the land use model. So the way that worked was the outcome voting, the percentage of respondents that supported various outcomes, that percentage actually was used to manipulate the weights of different impacts in that land use model. So for example, the example that's shown there shows that 48% of our participants said that water is clean and plentiful was a priority for them. Then that was used to impact that critical watershed weight in the land use model. And to just delve a little further into an example, I've circled there, more food is produced locally. That was something that both in the outcome-based voting, but also in all of our other feedback, there was a strong voice for supporting our agricultural system, focusing on local food, trying to make sure that our working lands stay in working land status. And so just to kind of look at this as an example of a local community priority that has kind of risen to the top, one of the things that we did in this process was complete a study on some potential value-added food products that could grow in our region. And so we have a nice sort of executive summary, that little brochure that can be used by our economic developers to help folks that are interested in agricultural and agribusiness to decide where they might want to focus. But then we also have a really in-depth report about these different products that gives a lot of information for people that might be interested in pursuing those niche products. In addition, we've been able to leverage the investment that we received from HUD to get some funding for an agricultural-related project that's just getting off the ground. It's the WNC AgriVentures project. This is a rural jobs and innovation accelerator project that's jointly funded by the USDA, the Economic Development Administration, and the Appalachian Regional Commission. This is a 3-year project, and it has a lot of different activities, but the one I want to specifically point out is this Farmers to Farmland pilot program. In our land use and natural resources work groups, we heard from some of the participants who are farmers and agricultural folks that a challenge in our area is that older farmers are ready to retire, their kids have moved on, they don't want to go into agriculture, and so they're looking for something to do with their land. And there are new farmers who've maybe got training, they're younger folks, they want to get started and they don't have land. And so we're instituting a program to kind of match those two groups up so that new farmers can get access to farmland that they need. And so, this is a place where a community priority, something that was identified in our work groups, actually became a focus area of a new project that we received funding for. So we're really excited about that. I just want to talk real briefly about kind of some of our final products as well. In trying to reach that preferred scenario, we have come up with a pretty broad set of potential implementation activities, and those kind of break out into policies, programs, plans, and projects that all filter into this pretty big strategy workbook. The strategy workbook has over 300 strategies in it, and it started out as a giant Excel spreadsheet, which you can imagine how useful that is for people outside of our world to really interact with. So we made the decision to kind of come up with a few different tools to share that information. The strategies include a lot of information with them, like potential partners and the scale and case studies and links to more information. We do have some funding information. So that information is presented in a few different ways. It's available in our regional plan. This is on our website in draft form. It's just been completed. You know, it's a big, huge document. It's over 200 pages and provides a whole overview of the process, how we develop that preferred scenario, and then all of those recommendations and initiatives, those different strategies that we've identified. We also have an executive summary that's a shorter, you know, like 15-page booklet that's going to highlight our early implementation strategies. Again, this is a place where our communities can see some of those priorities that they identified being highlighted. And then we are in the process of developing our online searchable, basically strategy toolkit. So I mentioned we had this big workbook of 300 strategies. This is a place where our communities can really delve into this information, find the things that are relevant to them that they want to work on, and get a lot more information about what would we really do if we wanted to pursue this strategy. What are some examples from other areas that are useful? It's going to be a really useful interactive tool that we hope can help really spur implementation of the plan. We're also working on a GIS viewer. I'm sure lots of you have projects that have elements like this, but you know, we've collected a lot of data through this project, and we want to make sure it's available to people. So this is an interactive map viewer that anyone can use on a desktop. It's not, you don't have to have special software to use it. You view it on the web, and then you can export or print the files, the maps right out of it. You can share them. We'll be presenting all the data we've collected, as well as some of the land use model information through the GIS viewer. So I'm happy to take any questions now, and I am happy to also follow up with folks afterwards if they want to email me directly.
Yeah, and if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, and then Carrie will be able to answer them for you. We'll have a question and answer session at the end of each presentation. So I see Anne is typing.
These must be long questions.
Okay, so Anne says, how many people were involved in your process, community people? What was the total area involved, land mass and acres?
I think we estimated we've had about, we've had several thousand participants over the course of the project in a lot of different ways. We've been out to community meetings, we've done surveys and different things like that. And I have it broken down in a lot of detail, not right in front of me, but we've had thousands of people participate. And then I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head the number of acres, but I could certainly follow up with Ann and provide that information. It's a 5-county area.
Okay. Looks like we also have Dave typing a question in. Okay, and Dave says, when you ask communities to identify priorities, outcomes, did you do it per community? Did you have regional convenings as well?
Okay, so in our 5-county area, we have I think it's 23 municipalities, so we didn't necessarily have a meeting in every town. We kind of used a blended approach. We did have, we had several regional convenings where we invited everybody to come together. I think we had 3 different sessions like that. We had county level meetings where folks could come, and then we also did a lot of kind of more on the ground outreach where we would go to existing meetings that were, like to the livestock auction and set up a table, like all kinds of things like that. So it was very broad across those different kinds of options. And then we had some online options too, as well as the small group sessions. And then the other thing we did too, when we were initially identifying some of the common themes and goals and things like that, we were looking at existing plans. So we worked with a consultant team to assist us with this, and they pulled all the existing plans across the region and kind of created a matrix to compare, what were the common goals. So that was another way that we, got a lot of feedback directly from communities, starting with those plans that had already been vetted in a public manner. So hopefully that answers that question.
Well, and I think that you touched on this a little bit, but Anne is asking if they voted via survey for the priorities.
Yeah, they voted. We did have a survey online with both rounds of community meetings that we held. So the first one was more, kind of current conditions and what do you want to see in the future in a more generalized way. The second round was about, here are the different scenarios, and the outcomes associated with those scenarios help select the outcomes that are most important to you to help us create this preferred scenario. And in that manner, they were able to vote via a survey or provide their feedback with different activities that we had at the meetings. And we really tried to make sure that whatever we did at the community meetings, those large public forums, was available in a variety of formats, so they could do it in a small group setting, or they could visit our website and do it there.
Okay. Did you track participation by sector? Was it important to identify private, public, government, etc.?
We did, wherever we could do that, particularly in our work groups where we were, having everybody come in and sign in. We did have people sign in at the larger meetings as well, but we did try to track what sectors we were getting folks from, trying to ensure that we did have private sector participation. I think that's always a challenge. Business people are busy, and so getting them to participate was hard. We did do a separate survey that was just for businesses, and then we tried to work with our local economic developers to try to ensure that businesses could participate or that they could share with us the concerns of the business community.
Oh man, as we get rolling, we have a few more people typing in questions.
Okay.
These are great, thank you. I appreciate all the questions that folks are asking. And my goal here was really for participants to see what other regional planning grantees are doing. And since both the projects that Carrie and David have worked on are 2010 projects, they're a little bit further ahead in the process, and I think this is a great opportunity to see what you all have done and how the things that you've collected have been incorporated into this regional plan. Okay, so Kathy has asked, what were your most successful methods to engage community members?
I think the small group discussions that we held, we recognized that we couldn't necessarily walk into, our Ukrainian community and get them to participate and talk with us. So we held an RFP process, and we, contracted with people in the community to actually help us get that feedback. So they, basically what we did was we provided them with some training to understand our process and what we were trying to ask, and then they went out and held meetings and reported back to us the feedback that they received. And that was really valuable. I think it really helped improve relationships with the community, because that, some of these people had never been asked before what they thought about anything. And we have a person on staff that translated our materials into Russian, and she had trouble figuring out how to say public meeting, because that's like not a word that they use at all. So it was just, I think it was a really good experience for all of us, because we did get to hear directly from people. And also it helped us realize that some of these questions that we're trying to ask in big long-term regional plans they're difficult, and they're not always relevant to people who have everyday challenges like how to get food on the table. So some of the feedback we got was really specific and maybe more immediate, but we try to make sure that it gets reflected in our implementation activities as well. So.
Okay, and Dave has asked, I know that your plan is in draft form right now. Can you walk us through the process of getting your regional plan approved for your 5-county area?
Well, I can tell you what we're going to try to do. So, you know, I don't think it's any secret that these projects across the country have had some challenges with some naysayers and conspiracy theorists who think it might be involved with some greater plot. And so we've had some challenges in our region as well. But our plan at this point, we are presenting tomorrow to our council board. So our Council of Governments has a governing board, like I'm sure many of you do. And so we're taking it to them tomorrow, and then we go back to them again later in October to ask for endorsement. And then we're going to take it out to our individual communities to try to get their endorsement as well, and to share with them. We're going to do a lot of outreach on the funnel tools and the website, including some workshops, so that they can really see not only what we did in terms of the process and what went into it, but what some of the tools are that they can use now. So, you know, we don't have, we can't mandate anything. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're providing some valuable tools for our communities. So I'm not sure exactly how the adoption process is going to go, but stay tuned and I'll tell you in 6 months.
Okay, and Ken's asked a great question. For your scenario and suitability modeling, you showed region-wide land use results. Did you stay at the regional level, or did you do finer scale for subregions or individual communities? And then also, when you did your quilt exercise, how large were the quilt area units of analysis?
Okay, so I'll do my best with the modeling question. The model was done with our consultant team, and I'm a planner, not a modeler. So, but those, it goes down to the county level. I mean, it was put together in CommunityViz, and we did present the information at the regional level and then also at the county level. And then we're going to be making the land use model available to our local governments for them to use, and they can test things at the community level as well. But in terms of how we presented it, it was primarily with at the regional and county level. And then the quilt exercise, it was very qualitative. So it wasn't a unit necessarily. What we were really saying is, which scenario of the 3 presented do you like the best? And then they got a different colored square depending on whatever it was, and then they were asked to put that up on the quilt board so that we could see at the end, oh, look, most of them are blue or most of them are orange. And it was, you know, basically a way for people to somewhat anonymously sort of see what their neighbors were saying and see how they fit into that, and also to tie it to a traditional cultural activity in our region. So it wasn't tied to geography really at all. Hope that answers your question.
Great. Do we have more questions for Carrie? Okay. If not, we're going to move on to our next presenter. Our next presenter is David Jaber. David is an associate at Blue Star Studios and has recently worked on 2 HUD Sustainable Community Planning projects. Today he's going to be talking about his work with the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota and also in the Flint Hills of Kansas. So, David?
Are you able to?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, yes, so as was just presented, I am going to talk about how we've been involved in 2 regional efforts. Given that we just saw Grow NC's process, I'm going to jump around and highlight some specific aspects, and if anything isn't clear, just let me know. And given the questions you all just asked, I can clearly skip the slide. So the 2 projects, as were mentioned, the first was the Flint Hills Frontiers. So this is a 19-county region in eastern Kansas. One second. Yes, so it's a 19-county region in eastern Kansas. Relatively rural, based around the Flint Hills ecoregion. Flint Hills began in 2011, and they're still continuing through their 2012 process, or they're still continuing through the process. Oyate Omniche was a 2010 grantee. Bear with me one second. I lost sound, so I'm going to need to dial back in.
David, are you still there?
I've lost sound.
We
Can
can
you
hear
hear
you
me?
fine. Yes.
Okay. I'm not able to get feedback is the issue. Can you send me the pin to dial in again? In the chat box?
Sure thing. Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, well then I'll just continue on. My apologies. So Oyate Omniche is that is planned for the Pine Ridge Reservation of the Oglala Sioux tribe or the Oglala Lakota people. And just as a further example, so here's who makes up Oyate Omniche. And I show this mostly just to show the real diverse range of responsibilities and interests that are have been involved in the consortium. Everything from housing entities to environment and water, economic development, BIA, and I think you'll find for virtually all of the the regional planning groups that they had to engage kind of a very wide range of groups. So I do want to talk a bit on the process. And so we just saw what Grow and See went through. So a lot of the questions that we asked would have been similar to what Carrie had presented in establishing their vision. And in the vision process, what we find, and I think what some of you were asking earlier, was the whole issue around identifying priorities. And based on what we've seen in doing that and in the vision meetings themselves, what you really want your facilitators to do is provide a framework that allows ideas to bubble up, that allows you to easily capture those ideas, but doesn't provide so much structure that you're kind of arbitrarily locked into specific directions. So usually what we're doing, and I say we, but I'm not kind of really a planner. A lot of my work is actually on more of the performance evaluation, performance measurement angle, but what my colleagues have been doing is asking more general questions just to kind of allow the general sense of what do you really appreciate about your region, what do you see as the challenges, and then kind of just to help flow into solutions later. So the first piece of it is kind of having visioning and kind of getting that feedback. And then the next step is kind of a distillation synthesis process that needs to happen. I think what we saw with both projects is that you generally get kind of a wide range of thoughts that indicate themes, but definitely not necessarily kind of the more concrete direction that you need in a real priority or in kind of a real priority setting. There's a lot of different kind of perspectives and feedback that comes through that's really all over the map. And I think in practice, the planning team has had to do a fair amount on the synthesis end and to kind of look at, okay, here's all the feedback we got. So what does this all mean? And how can we translate that into kind of initiatives and priorities? And then present that back to the community with ideally some level of transparency so they're clear to see, okay, here's the feedback that you got and here's how it fed into these priorities that you're now presenting to us. So here's the example for Oyate Omniche. In kind of going through that synthesis process, these are the 12 initiatives that the planning team came up with. Model everything from model community development to emphasis on kind of health, youth, and governance, looking at environmental aspects and land use, and then even flowing to language, because in this case, the Oglala Lakota, as kind of a tribal nation and native people, language was the core of their culture and something really important. And in fact, the feedback that we got pushed, highlighted the first 11 initiatives, and then we were talking more with some of the people that were kind of our regular, check-in stakeholders. They said, well, language really needs to be a part of this too. So then that was added to the 12th initiative. Flint Hills took a somewhat different approach. What they ended up doing is forming 6 issue areas, which would be similar to the catalyst groups of Vibrant Futures. And so what they have is natural systems, built environments, cultural systems, opportunity, which is essentially economic development, social systems, and then transportation. And then they also added, ranching and agriculture, because that's been a big piece of the activity historically in the Flint Hills. So anyone interested in these topics in the area can join in, discuss. Specific experts somewhat can inform the conversation, but really the focus of the groups, and then we're still in the process, is to really kind of brainstorm things that might be done in these different areas, do some research, and then come up with initiatives. Because based on going through the synthesis, we come up with really general areas, but what we really need to get to is just more details of what tangible projects can actually flow out of these different areas. We also like Wordles. This is a general Wordle, similar to what Carrie was showing earlier. But basically, it's just a nice way, and all you need to do is gather whatever text you have. You can plug it into this website, and it'll generate this. And it's a nice way to visually demonstrate the range of feedback, but then also show what's really prominent, what really come up as prominent themes. So here's a more detailed example from Oyate Omnichie. So for the communications or the technology infrastructure area, how that was articulated is increasing access to high-speed data transmission and internet, building technological capacity and awareness, and setting up a common framework for secure information sharing. Creating an online integrated interface for the tribe. And there's more details you can get into behind that, but that's kind of going down a next level of trying to get just more details and teeth around these priorities, because at the end of the day, we need to turn these into tangible projects. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. Flint Hills went a step further. They provided an online forum for their issue areas that plugs into their website. So basically any community member can register online, can suggest goals for their specific area. They can offer ideas, and they can rank ideas. But essentially, it's an online platform to allow community discussion and let the best ideas bubble up. It's a great way to capture ideas and just kind of help them give a life of their own, and just kind of more actively encourage community dialogue and foster real conversation around these issues. I think some of the questions earlier were talking about kind of voting and how priorities were set. So I think in practice we haven't quite seen the level of use required to allow this to drive the plan. But if well designed, online tools like this can be an asset. I think what we found is probably the most robust way to get feedback from the community is still in face-to-face meetings, more traditional. To a certain extent, it gets beyond the tech divide that certain people would have access, either have computer access or internet access, or just be more comfortable, more savvy with using them. But I think another part of it is just it's the way people have communicated and interacted for millennia. So it's going to take a while for online tools, I think, to completely replace that. So that was a quick dive into establishing priorities and details under the vision, under the plan. Another aspect of the work is working with the larger state and federal agencies that have a stake in the work and that can serve as resources. And the first is the Partnership for Sustainable Communities that has been supporting a lot of this regional planning work around the nation in the last few years. So I think, as most of you know, HUD's kind of central on that. Department of Transportation and EPA are also involved. In both the Flint Hills and Oyate Omnichie cases, since they're such rural areas, we felt it important that USDA be involved. Their rural development program, as many of you are likely aware, has a lot of great programs around development and other kind of resources, grant vehicles that can be tapped as part of that. And what we found in terms of acting and kind of tapping the greater government resources in particular is that in particular for Oyate Omnichie is that we were really working closely with our regional agency contacts. We actually sought them out just because we were getting a grant from Washington, D.C. didn't necessarily mean that the whole entity was kind of aligned toward working with us. And I think in retrospect it was kind of a great asset because the regional contacts with the regional headquarters, I think in our case, most cases it was out of Denver for us. You may have for Vibrant Futures. I think some of the relevant contacts actually are in Denver, but there's there could be Seattle or other kind of regional offices for the various federal agencies. But basically, I think a big thing they can help us do is just navigate federal funding opportunities. So when we're looking at implementation down the road, helping us understand what vehicles might soon be available or are available now, and then just help us coordinate to understand, who else within the government to work with on any of a range of aspects of the planning process. The second thing is that, particularly for these HUD-funded projects, they have established capacity builders, which are essentially nonprofits, university institutes, and other entities that can help with some very specific issues like organizational development, communication strategy, putting together a fair housing and equity assessment that you have to do is a part of most of these regional plans. And essentially to transfer lessons learned like we're doing in this webinar today. So these capacity builders can be a resource. One example and one for leading for the rural areas is NATO, which is the National Association of Development Organizations. There's also the Minnesota Housing Partnership for troubleshooting housing issues. There's a Rural Policy Research Institute and probably a handful of other people that can be there to kind of get like a third-party perspective on some specific planning issues. Okay, so another aspect of setting the regional plans is looking and thinking about how that actually translates to the local level, to the cities where a lot of the action actually happens. The local community may have been involved with the regional planning process, but that's still separate from actually seeing regional priorities show up at the local level. The regional plan definitely doesn't guarantee that. For Oyate Omnichie, the first initiative that I showed earlier was model community development, and so that actually has gone forward. Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation was kind of a key partner in spurring the process together forward in the first place. And for the last decade, they've been working for prosperity on the Pine Ridge Reservation, particularly around youth and economic development. For many years, Pine Ridge was unfortunately pointed out as the poorest county in the nation. They've made a little progress since then, but I think there and with our native communities in general throughout the states, there's been a lot of poverty, a lot of disenfranchisement, and kind of loss of the resources that were historically there. So there's a lot kind of pent up need for kind of redevelopment, and establishing kind of healthy economies and healthy communities. So Thunder Valley has been kind of leading this effort on Pine Ridge Reservation, and so they are working actively with that to build funding. They are currently in the process of gathering together money for pre-development and development of an 80-home development over 40 acres, which is a relatively dense development, but really they want to have this community be a showcase for all different kind of sustainable living technologies. So they've gone through a master planning process. They've leveraged tens of thousands of dollars of engineering and design and kind of other services from some private sector firms already. And here you see they've started on a straw bale construction as part of that demonstration. And that'll feed into some lessons learned I want to present later. But I think what we found is also part of the regional planning process that's really important is getting some tangible progress relatively early, even if it's relatively small projects. A lot of time, if you're just going through and asking people for feedback, and if people after a few months just have the perception that there's a lot of talk and they're not seeing, a lot of tangible progress, it's easy for them to lose faith in the process and kind of lose hope and get jaded about it. So I think to the extent that you can show some progress early, it doesn't necessarily need to be big, can be a real asset, and I know that's what Thunder Valley is doing to support Oyate Onichie. What Flint Hills has done as part of their opportunity group is to develop an economic development district. And that's kind of a more local area, not their whole 19-county region, but a region involving a few counties, just to form a district to more formally kind of incentivize economic development in that area. And so as part of the process for both of these projects, a lot of organizations have been involved. They've supported in many different ways. There's the formal consortium members that are needed as part of the planning process. There's other stakeholders, and there's funders. And I think for true implementation, there's always this question of, well, how do you attract investment? Actual, particularly money. Although in kind is great, but to really enhance implementation, clearly money's needed, and it's required for some initiatives. And I think for many of the projects around the nations that have launched in the last few years, I think it's still an open question as to what extent they'll attract investment. It was great to see Grow NC has already gotten money for the incubator or for the agricultural work, and I think one thing to remember with these regional planning processes, it's really kind of a long-term effort. You're setting a vision for 10 or 50 years. It's going to be a long process, and so attracting investment, I think, is also going to be an ongoing thing. Going to be that's kind of more tied to long-term success, and it's something to look through. And I think it's still kind of an open question with a lot of these projects. To what extent they're going to do that. I mentioned with the Oyate Onichie, they have a certain amount around the model community development, and we'll see what plays out with the other initiatives. And so finally, to close up with some lessons learned, because I know we're starting to get a little long on time. I had talked about showing results early because people, I think, really want to see action results, and it's really a great way to help people stay engaged. Identifying catalytic projects and launching them as a demo, and they don't have to be huge, just kind of meaningful and quick. We had kind of one straw bale building before. or one stretch of trail, something that's, doable and tangible. I think another thing to think about is just to organize and clarify. So, your plan and everyone's ability to support it is really only as good as, how well it's organized and how well implementable projects are offered. The problems in your region. You've been talking about them for weeks or maybe decades. Just as part of this process, just clarifying kind of what you see as the solutions, what needs to happen and when is going to help other people, support the idea and help attract investors. On creating a common language, we found the federal government with the regional planning, these regional planning projects talk one way and the community another. And, there really needs to be kind of a common language that can kind of appeal to everyone. For example, the livability principles are great. For an urban environment, they're kind of completely applicable. I think for both Oyate Omniche and Flint Hills, or more rural areas, there needed to be some translation to rural. There's certain indicators around open space and kind of food deserts that really don't seem to apply, for example. But what we want to do is just kind of take the intent behind those and kind of make those tangible and just kind of make those relevant. And there definitely may be cases in kind of going through this that some of the initiatives and planning just needs a little work to apply to your community. Tracking and measuring progress is invaluable in telling your story and others in your community. And again, kind of attracting investors if they can see, what you've actually done and what you've been able to achieve. And on that note, don't be afraid to tell your story. As millennia, how we as people have really conveyed information is through the power story. And, as Vibrant Futures goes down, kind of continues down the road and starts to kind of crystallize its vision, you may feel you should be humble, but you may find that what you're doing is actually inspiring, and telling your story is really the only way to draw support to your cause. So with that, I'll close. Thank you for the opportunity to present on what's been done.
If you have questions of David, feel free to type them in the chat box. One of the questions that I wanted to ask either Carrie or David is strategies for sustaining and implementing the regional plan beyond the grant period. Do you have thoughts or comments on that?
This is Carrie. I guess I would just say one of the things that we've done is try to identify things around which there's already some momentum. So either projects that already have funding or that we're applying for funding or we have some interest in as our early implementation activities, and that's kind of where that agricultural project came in, so that could kind of keep some momentum, and then also kind of knowing what some of the more long-term things are that will take more time so that you can kind of take a phased approach. But yeah, I mean, getting implementation money is, I think, probably always a challenge, and considering our current environment, I think is even more so.
Okay. David, thoughts that you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, I think that was essentially what I was trying to say earlier about this the challenge of attracting investment and keeping things going. I think part of why, COGS, Council of Governments, or just regional governments have been the place where a lot of these plans have sat is because they can at least part act as kind of a living embodiment of the plan. For Oyate Omniche, one of the initiatives was creating a regional planning office to essentially do that, and the idea was that they could more actively fundraise in a way that these other entities, the separate agencies, wouldn't be able to do, and they could focus on doing that. But yes, it remains an open question to what extent they're going to be able to attract investment. They know they need to do it, and we'll see how that plays out.
Okay. Another question that I wanted to ask is, what do you all feel that was the biggest challenge in your planning process, and how did you go about addressing it?
Sounds like you, Carrie.
I guess understanding and skepticism about what we were trying to do. You know, the kind of Tea Party Agenda 21 concerns were able to take hold and impact some of the participation in the project. And it was, you know, unfortunate because we lost some participation, but also because it was served as kind of a distraction from just doing the work and getting people involved. And so, you know, what we did was we tried to answer concerns. We tried to, you know, just be there, understand, know when we might have challenges like in public meetings and be prepared to answer those questions. And I think we've been able to do as well as we could, be expected given some of the challenges we've had. And now it'll be interesting to see kind of how that stuff plays out now that we're back to returning to some of these local governments with the final products.
And on our end, I think for Yateche, luckily we did not have that problem. I think the biggest problem was probably getting a broad, I mean, I think it's kind of endemic in planning, getting kind of a very broad range of participation so you're kind of really clear that what your plan does represent the voice of the people. It's usually kind of a smaller subset of people that is able to clear time to really participate. And I know even for some of our consortium members, when we were going back to like finally complete the plan, we almost had to set up, you know, face-to-face meetings, actually like go to the office to like walk through the plan with them because it wasn't, it was just challenging to get, you know, them to kind of, you know, clear the time and make sure that they were kind of sign off and buy off, and that we kind of had, you know, really kind of addressed any concerns that they might have.
Okay, so Anne has asked, do your local governments feel the plan represents them well?
You know, we've tried very consciously to listen to the feedback we got both from our local governments and from other participants, and tried to, you know, use as our starting point planning that had already been done in the region. And I think, you know, we tried to make this a project where, like you're saying in this whole webinar, where local priorities could be elevated to a regional level. And, you know, I think we're curious to see what feedback we get as we continue to go back to our communities, but what we're hearing lately has been very positive.
And on our end, I think it's probably Flint Hills is probably the most relevant for that question. You know, I think because Flint Hills is still kind of, you know, finalizing kind of its plan and working through the plans process now, that also remains to be seen. But I think given the level of participation we've seen from local governments, I think it bodes well. You know, the counties and cities have been fairly involved. I think to what extent they incorporate kind of regional plan elements into their own, you know, decision-making, general plan, et cetera, remains to be seen.
Okay. Jay has asked, how does having a regional plan benefit your communities in the short term and in the long run?
Well, I think, you know, for us, it was an opportunity to talk about how all these different issues are interrelated, and it's been quite relevant to things that I think are becoming, you know, sort of more relevant issues right now, like, you know, looking at health and the built environment and how those things are related. So it's been a great way to have that more interdisciplinary conversation, and I think, you know, we're hopeful that in terms of moving the region in a good direction, that's going to be a good tool for that. So, you know, there's that sort of side of it. and then I think, you know, HUD and some of these other federal agencies have said it's going to help us in future funding opportunities. That sort of remains to be seen, although I will say we've had a couple of HUD projects get funded locally that, you know, I'm sure it didn't hurt them and it helped them to have the couple of extra points that we provided by being part of the project.
One thing Thunder Valley was very clear about when they were initiating the project, the planning project for their tribe, is that no one had really kind of had the time or taken the opportunity to set kind of a big picture or vision for the tribe. You know, different agencies would focus on their various areas. And the sense is that just kind of having that coherent vision, you know, whether or not people are supporting it now or 10 years from now, is really going to be an asset. So when people want to turn to language initiatives, they have something to point to. There also is, as you know, Carrie had mentioned, if for certain grants coming out of the Partnership for Sustainable Communities, you are supposed to get 2 extra points if you have one of these projects. So that's also potentially a benefit.
Great. Ken is asking about comments on the challenges of applying sustainability principles to traditional big agriculture versus local food and specialty egg products.
You know, I think David some of it is about adapting language and, you know, like the livability principles, some of that stuff you know, they are really good, and we had to, you know, kind of adapt how we talked about these things so that it was more focused on identifying what's important to your community and can protect those things that are important to you. You know, in our region, we have so many topographic challenges that, you know, it's not like a place with a lot of flat land where you can have huge, huge farms. I mean, we do have some, but, you know, we're dealing, you know, probably our biggest agricultural product here is apples. We have a lot of apple orchards, and so, you know, I think certainly there are challenges, but we've had maybe more success in making that conversation about how do we preserve these working lands. You know, I'm not sure I would be very successful if I went and met with the Henderson County Apple Growers Association and talked about let's all stop using pesticides, but I could go there and talk about, you know, if you guys have a bad year or we have a late freeze and you lose a lot of your crop, what can we do? What kind of tools can we put in place so that all your land doesn't become, you know, greenfield development? So maybe it's about picking what portions of the sustainability conversation you can have and getting success where you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Thanks, David. Do we have more questions for folks? We do have one more presenter. Okay. Our last presenter is Jenny Rogers. She's the director at Community Strategies Institute, and she's an expert in affordable housing programs and communications. Jenny's been helping us to develop some of our communication pieces. And because this is a grassroots level planning, ongoing participation is very necessary. I've asked Jenny to talk to you today about continued engagement and being champions within your own community. I was really glad to see Kathy ask earlier about successful engagement methods. So I'm going to let Jenny take it from here and talk to you about communication.
Great, thanks, Karen. Whoops.
Hold on a second here.
David, you don't look happy. There we go. As long as I'm not on video, I'm fine. Yeah, thanks for asking me to put together just a little closing presentation here about communications. as Erin said, I've been working with Vibrant Futures for the last few months trying to put together some of their communication strategies. And because this is such a large region and there's so much going on with this regional plan, participation is key. And you heard with the other presentations that I found were fascinating, ways that people engaged in development of the regional plan. And just to start off, I think that most of you on the call have been engaged in the Vibrant Futures planning process, and you've really made the commitment to participate and bring your own ideas and talents to the table. And we kind of wanted to end this webinar by encouraging you to get other people involved. It's a challenge getting out into such a large area of the state, and that really means that all of you need to be a communication tool. Your community leaders, your neighbors, coworkers, your friends and families of residents throughout the entire region. And so you really can bring people to the table and bring a message about Vibrant Futures to all of those folks. Obviously, you're probably someone that's trusted to provide information, and so I think that the Vibrant Futures staff really want to know, what you can find out at the local level from everyone that you interact with. We're just going to go over a few quick things about messaging and about communicating. First is, what's your own message about getting involved? Before you talk to people in your community, you probably want to make a plan. You want to consider the following questions. First, what do you want to say? And I think David and Carrie both presented those word webs, kind of the thoughts and the issues that are important to the people in the region. What would your word web look like if you think about Vibrant Futures and what you want the region to look like and your own community to look like in the next 20 years? What do you want people to know about Vibrant Futures? What do you want to find out from others in your community that could help inform the regional plan? How do you want to ask people to become involved? How do you communicate about Vibrant Futures in a way that locals can understand? Which comes to, what language are you going to use to make the project relate to your local community? David mentioned that some of the HUD Sustainable Communities language might not relate completely to a rural area, but as you're an involved person, you probably can think about how it would relate to your town or your county, your neighbors. And I just want to mention that Vibrant Futures staff have a lot of written materials, brochures and discussion guides that you can use in your own community when you're making a presentation or to give to members of your community. Next, you want to think about whom you're going to say this to. Do you want to talk to your local leaders? Are there certain groups working on local issues who you want to consult with? Do you want to talk to a broad audience and let them know about the project? Or maybe you're part of a group that could be providing input and feedback about the process. And then Carrie mentioned in her presentation the Russian-speaking community. You want to see if there are people in your own community who might be missing from the conversation, and think about how you might bring them into this planning process and make sure that their voice is heard. You want to think about what tools you'll use to deliver your messages. Carrie presented a lot of ideas, including things like small group conversations. Maybe there's one-on-one conversations you want to have with people. Perhaps you want to attend formal meetings, a presenter at community meetings that are going on in the area. Some of you are representatives of local governments and agencies. It's possible to post a link to Vibrant Futures on your own website. Local media outlets are a great place to deliver some messages. And even just think about, how do people in your community come by information? Do they all chat at the coffee shop? Excuse me. Are they all talking on the school playground while they wait for kids to get out of school? Do they have church socials or coffee hour after church where people are talking about local issues? Maybe your newspaper is where everybody finds out information. You want to think about where people are getting information, where you're comfortable putting information, and what tools you have at hand. And then the last question that you want to ask is, how are you going to know if you're successful? I think it's important that any local communication efforts that you undertake are communicated to the Vibrant Futures staff and shared with them so that they know what all their partners are doing out in their communities and can help you and track what's going on at that local level. Let them know if you've attended a meeting, hosted a conversation, or posted a link on your website. You probably want to track the number of people that attend a meeting if you hold one, or if you're making a presentation, ask people to sign in with contact information before the presentation. Vibrant Futures website can track people who request to receive information about the project, and they can also look at how many people are liking the Vibrant Futures Facebook page. Those are some other ways to track participation. So one of the ways that you can engage local community members is to take the opportunity to talk to people where they gather and where you are. You can strike up a casual conversation anytime. You can prepare a more formal presentation or a discussion, and you can request that Vibrant Futures staff come and help you make those presentations or provide you with material to make a presentation. One communication method that we've given to the advisory council, but could be used by anyone, is something called an elevator speech, which is really a brief, persuasive speech that you use to spark interest in a topic, for instance, Vibrant Futures and the regional plan. And a good elevator pitch should last no longer than 20 to 30 seconds, the time it takes to ride up in an elevator. That's the idea, is that it's quick and easy to understand, and is something that you have practiced, that you are good at discussing a topic. You can use one to introduce Vibrant Futures to residents who might be skeptical or suspicious of the process, or maybe to people who want to become involved but don't know where to start. And you can also use them to tell people about your involvement in Vibrant Futures and what's going on in your community as part of the regional plan. So some of the topics that you might talk about in an elevator speech are, what is Vibrant Futures? There's still people in the region that don't really understand what's going on and what the process is. Why is it important to you? That really relates the whole initiative back to your local community. And if people know you, they'd understand why you're involved. What do you want to see included in the plan for your community? Erin talked about the fact that it's important to have all the different communities and community groups reflected in the plan. What needs do your neighbors see in the next 20 years? Ask them. What opportunities shouldn't be missed? Are there catalytic projects that should be included? Things like David talked about, easy opportunities that you see or your neighbors know about that maybe others in the region don't. And what do your neighbors want your community to look like in 20 years? You want to ask them that as well. Besides oral communication, you can use local media to let others know about Vibrant Futures. And a great way to get free press and express your opinion or pose questions is through letters to the editor. So you may decide that you want to send your local newspaper a letter related to local issues that you want to be part of the regional plan, or you might want to write a letter stating support for the Vibrant Futures planning process and let people in your community know why you're involved. Ask them for their feedback, ideas, and concerns, and engage them and ask them to give you that information. The other thing that you can do is to share with others the Vibrant Futures website link, again, on your organization's website. And then what can your neighbors do? What can people in your community do to become part of the process? How can they become involved? You might invite them to do a little research into Vibrant Futures by visiting the Vibrant Futures website. There's a lot of information on there about the project. They can view community input to date. They can access community resources, national resources, information about upcoming webinars, all kinds of things. Vibrant Futures has a Facebook page, and there are day-to-day updates on that Facebook page. It's a nice, friendly atmosphere for people to dip their toe in and see what's going on. And I know some of the plans for the future include things like daily polls or you know, questions that can be posed to the community where they can post their opinions or their feedback or ideas on that Facebook page. Community members can also join the Vibrant Futures contact list, and they can get email updates, the online newsletters, links to resources, and find out about upcoming opportunities throughout the region. There's still space for residents to join the Catalyst groups and provide community input into the regional plans. As many of you know, because you're probably part of the Catalyst group, that's an opportunity to give your community's input into the regional plan. You can voice specific community priorities, and you get to work alongside other people from the region that you might not know already, and work with some of the planners throughout the region on designing the plan. You and other folks in your community can also request a visit and a presentation from the Vibrant Future staff. They can come to community meetings, they can come to your organization or event to explain what's going on in the region and get their input and ask them to become involved. So the last slide I've got is just contact information for the folks at Opportunity Links who are staffing Vibrant Futures. If you or anyone else in your community wants to contact them specifically with specific questions or requests, here's their contact information. This webinar is going to be posted on the Vibrant Futures website. So all the information, there's great presentations from other regions in the country, and all of this information will be up on the website if you want to access it at a future time. And that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if anyone has questions.
Thanks, Jenny.
Sure.
So one question, of course, you can type questions in, but one question I wanted to ask, as Jenny was going through her presentation of David and Carrie, is what tools do your communities have now from the project that communication tools that they didn't have before?
Well, similar to the ones that have already been discussed, you know, we have a Facebook page, we have a website where we post a lot of information. We post all of our slideshows. And then I think probably the networks that were created through these small group discussions probably serve as an informal communication tool.
Yeah, and similarly, Flannels has that online forum I was showing you earlier to kind of go deep on the different issue areas or catalyst groups. And there's also website, and then there's a lot you can do to drive traffic to the website around that. I think, I know for Pine Ridge, I think a lot of that activity has died down now that it's been, that the plan has been adopted. But I think as the different implementation for the different initiative plays out, there may be certain things like this model community development that'll actually be something kind of tangible on the ground that would be a tool of sorts, because it's supposed to be like demonstrating various technologies that you know, other communities might be able to, you know, replicate.
Okay, great, thanks. I see we have a couple of folks typing in, so I'll wait for those questions to come up. I wanted to thank Jenny for kind of walking through the ways that you can be involved and how you can connect with your community members, because this webinar is about advancing community priorities through the regional plan. And I think there are a number of opportunities to reach out to folks at the local level. So I would appreciate your continued support of that, and hope to hear back from you through the means that Jenny mentioned, the websites and Facebook or email. So Kate has asked, have you used any exhibits, displays that are in places like city halls or libraries? And I suppose that could
So
be
this is
open to
David.
all three.
Yeah, so this is David. So interesting you mentioned that. So for Flint Hills, one of the partners in that is what they call the Flint Hills Discovery Center. And that's essentially what it is like, you know, exhibits just talking about kind of, you know, history, ecology. And they've hosted one site. They don't yet have an exhibit specifically on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if something like that shows up, and that's definitely yet another resource I think to leverage in your area.
Yeah, I think
Carrie, I would just say we've done some kind of temporary things like this, and one of our consultant partners has what they call a downtown engagement site. It's a space in a popular retail location downtown in Asheville, and they have posters up in their windows and stuff like that, so people kind of walking by will see it.
It's a great idea to develop exhibits and displays that can travel throughout the region to, you know, when you have an opportunity for an event where you might be able to display those things so that they're seen throughout the entire area.
And also on that theme of just kind of alternative ways to get the word out, on Pine Ridge, they ended up we had a weekly radio show where they would just talk about sustainability in general, kind of about the plan. I think like each week they would present like on, you know, part of the planning process, or also use it just kind of an education to the community about planning in general. But that's also can be like a forum where you can go in any number of directions if you can get that much time with the local radio station.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've done radio interviews as well. It's a great way to reach populations that may be their only way of, you know, getting that information. So.
great. Do we have more questions from participants? If so, I'll give just another minute here while I wrap up for folks to type questions in. I guess some of the things that I wanted to say in closing is we do have more webinars coming up. Our next webinar will be October 29th, and it'll be talking about the livability principles, and hopefully some of the topics that we touch on are going to coincide with what the Catalyst groups are working on, and what they maybe need a little more assistance or guidance on. And then November 26th will be Livability Principles Part 2. So stay tuned for that information. Samantha will be sending out the invites for the upcoming webinars. Also, just a reminder, our Catalyst groups will be meeting at the University of Great Falls on October 1st and 2nd. So if you need more information about those, please contact Sammy. Her contact information is up here on the screen. And I think that's all I had to add. So I thank our guest speakers for being on today. Your presentations were fantastic, and I think we had a lot of good questions and good participation. So thank you. Thank you for all of the participants that are on the webinar today, and I look forward to having you on future webinars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.